Welcome to What's Left, a political discussion challenge the mainstream left. My name is Andy Libson, and I'm joined today by Kenny and Michael. Eduardo can't be here with us this week, but he'll be back next week. We are online at whatsleftpodcast.com. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, share your favorite episode, and jot down our information wherever you found this episode. You can also get a shirt or merchandise from us. If you're interested in that, contact us through whatsleftpodcast.com. All right. So it's not too often that we get to talk about fun stuff here on What's Left. And that's what I want to talk about today. At least fun for me, and I think it'll be fun for you too. The Bay Area had the pleasure of being visited by Fabio Vighi, somebody we've talked a lot about on this show. I was thinking about names of people who have really influenced me over the years that we've been doing this show. Names like John Kleisick, Jake, Allison McDowell, Eric Lerner, Jay and JD from North Carolina, and Fabio Vighi. Those are just some names that have not just been great to meet, but people who've really influenced my thinking about the world and about the possibility of revolution. And he came here to the Bay Area. He was invited by Stanford to come and speak during the week, this last week. And he reached out to us and said, "Hey, can some of you, want to get together?" And I think the idea was some of us could maybe see him speak. And Michael, you didn't. You'll talk maybe a little bit about that earlier. I think Michael, you're the only person who actually heard him speak in Stanford. But for the rest of us, we had the pleasure of actually getting together with him in person on Friday and on Saturday. And I just thought it was fantastic. It was so good to see him. So good to be with you guys. Jeff Straw was there as well. And I just want to talk about it and kind of just, bask in the afterglow of a really great experience. That's what I would describe it as. So maybe I'll ask either Kenny or you, Michael, where you'd want to start with this conversation.
I'm curious actually about Michael's experience, because that was the first sort of interaction with Fabio in California. So maybe you speak to that, Michael.
Yeah. It was very interesting to go to Stanford, and I work near Stanford, so I'm around there. I've been there a few times in the last year, but it really is, this place is the training ground of the elite. I mean, these are people being groomed to manage the economy and society at the highest levels, and so it always is it's a little bit of a weird feeling being on Stanford's campus and walking into Fabio's talk. I was a little bit late, but he was going through, essentially the phases of the industrial revolutions and how the turn to finance came after, the successive rounds of automation, and his talk focused really on how that showed up culturally in film. And good talk. It was also this nice feeling of being in a room where you get to talk about. There seemed to be in the colloquium, the talk he was giving, like a sense of agreement that sort of the underlying problems with capitalism were what was giving rise to these very contradictory and strange forms of expression in film. And it was also clear, this is someone who I know is a revolutionary and has this job where they get to kind of talk about it, but has to then play the role, it has to play the role of the intellectual who engages with all the people and tries to challenge them in a kind way, but there's really only so far he can go in a talk at Stanford. And the thing that was surprising to me was just how warm he was when I came up and said hi. It was like, oh, he was like, hey, I know you. It was like I felt like everybody knew him. I felt like, he must have tons of friends. But, I think like anyone else who has hardly traveled here, why would he have friends here, necessarily, unless he had lots of colleagues. So it was kind of like meeting a hero and realizing that they're just, a person. But also, what has dawned on me, and it dawned on me right then, is that partially why I love him so much is he says stuff that backs me up. It's like, here's an intellectual, and I'm like, see, he agrees. See, are you all seeing this? He agrees with me. Look at all the work he did. And that's, in a way, that's why we love him. He backs us up, and he's, has the academic rigor. But it's also fascinating to me how a lot of the stuff we've been reading from, like going back recently and reading stuff like Debord on The Spectacle and John Zerzan, this kind of like anarchist train of thought, actually is completely in line with what I feel right now. Is Fabio. I feel like Fabio's work really builds on that kind of psychoanalysis, anarchist complete rejection of authority, to make sense of what's happening right now. Talking to him more, realizing that there's a lineage of thought that I'm tapping into that is helping me make sense of the present. And he is also like it's just weird to read Zerzan and Debord and then realize like this one guy who's backing us up is basically building from that same kind of tradition. Like there's just an interesting convergence around a specific set of ideas that I had ignored before.
Well, maybe I'll go next because I think I was the next person to get in touch with him or see him. And I'll probably come back to that. Love him because he backs us up. Partially true, but I would say there's another reason for me that I just really am just a big fan of Fabio's. And hopefully I will get into that. And I do relate to that as it relates to that initial article we read. I feel like, Kenny, for some reason, I hold you responsible for me knowing about it. I don't know if that's true. That one about the COVID pandemic being a collision.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, but what do you call it when you bring down a building? Controlled demolition. A controlled demolition of the U.S. economy, using the lens of BlackRock's attempt to go direct, and to survive the next. Essentially, it was a repeat of 2008 economic collapse, but an attempt of the capitalists to kind of like get in front of it before it happened, and COVID became the excuse. The lockdowns became the excuse. Like that article for me. Yeah, like that was something like that backed me up, if you will, that gave me a Marxist view of looking at what had happened and not just a conspiratorial view of what just happened. So what was surprised for me was like I knew we were going to get together that Saturday, but it was great when he reached out to me or us and basically said, "Hey, Andy, can you get together Friday?" Like he knew I couldn't make Wednesday or Thursday or any of the days that he was going to be at the Stanford campus because I was working. And he said, "I'm going to be in San Francisco on Friday. And like, can you make that? Like, because he wanted to do sightseeing." And I was like, "Oh, like I'm working, but at around 6:00, I'm going to a Stop AI organizing meeting that was going to be at the Federal Building. I mean, the Ferry Building, and I said, I'm going to be there at 6, come by at 7 or 7:30. And then I can drive you back to Palo Alto, which would be like a a 30 or 40-minute trip. And I was like, I would just love the opportunity to talk to you. And at first he was like, no, I can take the Caltrain back. And I was like, no, 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 no. I want to drive you. So I was at the Stop AI organizing meeting, which there's some interesting things that happened there. I'll talk later, maybe not later, but on a future episode, I think is worth talking about what's going on there. But he showed up with a friend who he had met at Stanford, who I think was also Italian. His name was Paolo, and they had been, and Paolo knows San Francisco more, so Paolo and him had taken the train down here. And then he gave me a hug. I hugged him, and I introduced him to all the people at Stop AI. And he was just super nice because the Stop AI people were like all on him saying, hey, can you translate this into Italian, and can we get your number? And he was very kind about it. And I was trying to like back them off with a stick a little bit. But it was good. It was good for everyone to meet each other. And I showed people at the place his book, the Emergency Capitalism. They were pretty excited about that. And then we just drove, and drove back to Palo Alto. And I remember just asking him, just peppering him with questions. And some of they were really about like, it was about like talking about the European ruling class. And I said, I am really surprised that the European ruling class are as much lapdogs of the US capitalist class as the South American ruling class. Like they are willing to destroy their entire continent just for the American capitalists, because they're willing to be on the front. They're willing to be used as proxies and very much potentially nuclear proxies. The first places where nuclear bombs may be dropped from Russia will likely be in Europe more than the United States. And they even know that. Like, it's crazy. And I asked him, like, what does he make of that? Is that true? And he goes, yeah, that is true. And we were talking also about the European working class, because I said, I really expected the European working class at one point to just be like much more militant than they have been in response to all these. And he was like, he largely confirmed that the very process that had been used to tame the American working class is in play in Europe. And while he did acknowledge that, like, the response to Gaza has been much bigger in Europe than it was in the United States, he confirmed that, like, look, you're not going to get any salvation from European workers. Like, they're not going to save you. Like, well, at least that's how I heard it. He didn't say those words, but that's how I heard it, and that was helpful for me to hear. Like, just like we have our own work to do here in the United States, I don't see the European working class being some model of militancy that's going to somehow act as for the U.S. working class. Like, he's like, like particularly the fact that there's so much desperation around jobs and employment in Europe, that they very well may be able to get away with this massive militarization buildup, which is going to be a boon to industry, and jobs will come as a result of it. Like, even if there's opposition to what's going on in terms of NATO's war on Russia. So that was really, those were the sorts of things we talked about on Friday. And then that was the day that I basically said, hey, I know we're supposed to get together 11 a.m., but Michael and Jeff can't make it till 2 p.m. Would you be open to, like, extending it? Maybe we would get together 11 a.m., do some sightseeing, and then get together with Michael at 2 p.m. And he was like, absolutely, And I just thought his open two things. His openness just to be like, okay, let's do this, let's do that. Yeah, I just thought it was wonderful. And I told him this other thing is like, my association with leftists, and particularly leftists who come from academia, is so connected to even a kind of arrogance that is like a threat of it, that kind of could be there. And it was just none of that whatsoever, and it was just like, it was so gratifying to be among me with a person who holds similar politics to me. And I feel like as committed to that, and more models the kind of human I feel like these politics should make you. They should not make you like a jerk. I feel like these politics should make you like a better person. That might be a moral statement, but I feel like if you really embrace them, they should. And it was just nice to see that confirmed with him. And so I was very much looking forward to us getting together the next day, which is where Saturday hit, and we met at Dila's Cafe, and that's where Kenny, I guess, first came in and kind of met me and Fabio. So I guess I'll push it over to you then, Kenny, and see what you have to say.
For me, this was a very emotional weekend, for many reasons. I guess I'll speak to why Fabio's became important during the COVID period. Right, this is a year and a half into the quote unquote pandemic is when he wrote that article that you mentioned, Lipson. I don't want to take credit for bringing that into our sphere. I think it was Jeff, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I do remember that article, A Self-Fulfilling Prophecy, Controlled Demolition of the Economy. It's in the Philosophical Salon if people want to read it, because I think that was very important to me, because it painted a, a more a concrete picture on what was happening. Because in What's Left, we explored a lot of the things that he writes about in that article. We were very critical of the response of the left. We talked about science, right? We talked about technology. We talked about all these elements coming into our world, AI. And then, but I remember that we did not really have an economic angle to this, right?
Right. Yep.
Like yes, the rulers of the world, or the capitalists are up to something, but why, right? Some people took the angle of medical freedom, right, and like individual rights and all that stuff, and control, which is part of this, but still, like, what is the big picture? And so I guess the basic big argument is that the economy was overheating, right? And he shows evidence in that article, and then he explained as to why money had to be infused in the economy, blah blah blah. And so that's why it became very important, because here is someone who, like you said, Michael, has the academic and intellectual rigor to look at something, present an argument in a sequence of events, and again, he's as critical, he's as of the left, because by and large, a lot of, I would say, intellectuals of the left, Marxists, like, for example, they're not very critical of China. A lot of people defend China as some sort of step in the towards a revolution of sorts, or a communist utopia, but which is not, right. And so he's very critical, and so that's where it became very important. And I developed a following of his work. Like, I read all his articles on the Philosophical Saloon, and so I understand, more or less, like, his big argument and how he uses that to analyze current events. And so meeting him was, I purposely, I make an effort to not see people as idols, like whether it's either Star or anybody else. And so I was curious to meet the person, like, and like you said, Lipson, there's still some sort of like looking up, right? Like that we did, because he's someone who was able to manage this article that, I think it's a massive argument that will live, in the future, like this will be, to me, is something of massive intellectual importance to understand what happened in COVID. And so meeting the person, was even more gratifying, because like you said, he's very humble. The biggest thing that I got from him is that he's willing to listen, as much as he's willing to talk. And again, and for me, this was more than Fabio. This was also me meeting Michael for the first time in person, seeing you, Lipson, after I don't know how many years at this point, like maybe 1 or 2 years in person. Jeff, and all of you are very important in my understanding of the world. Like, I don't pretend that I know everything, right? I have my own ideas and my own priorities, intellectual priorities, to kind of like drive into the conversation. But just being together was, for me, the highlight. And I say that it was very emotional, because that was my first time in San Francisco, in the Mission District, with people who have shaped and are continuing to shape my understanding of what's happening. Um, and coming back to a place where I feel I was exiled from, I was outcasted, I was kicked out, and like returning to the epicenter where my activities was taking place, where the place that I care so much about, where I you know it was very emotional. It was like my partner said that I went through a hell of a full circle at that point. And I don't know what's next, but I know that what we did being in person, talking about ideas in person, without the mediation of technology, it's again, it was reinforced to me that that's important and that's critical and like fundamental in anything that we're trying to do. Because it goes beyond just the intellectual; it's about the human aspect of it, right? And everything that comes from that. And so, for me, it was an amazing experience to not only meet Fabio, but all of us be together in one space and listen to what we had to say.
Yeah, and what I want to add to that, and this is where I'll take up the additional thing that I really appreciate about Fabio was what you mentioned about listening, but also like um, there are there are things that I differ on him. Like Michael, you kind of touched on that when we were at La Boheme, when you said, you had mentioned which comes first, the kind of the doing, the act, or the thought kind of thing. And you were putting forward an idea of like maybe the thought came first or something like that. And you said, "Oh, don't say that in front of Andy because he doesn't believe that." That's true, Um, and Fabio, I do believe when he puts forward what his argument he puts forward does seem to suggest more revolution as as an act of imagination, before it's an act of doing, which I don't agree with, and I do think it comes down to some of the differences I have over whether techno-feudalism is a possibility and things like that. But it was funny because we could talk about those differences without it being in any way like feeling like something massive was at stake, whether our relationship would be at stake or anything like that. He would kind of hear me out. I would hear him out. And it was just like, it was just heard, like, and the stakes were just lowered on the whole thing. Like it felt more human. Um, and that was a big deal to me. Like that is something I want to do here on what's left, but I also want to do that out in the world. Like, and I want that to be true in the revolutionary world. And it hasn't for most of my life been true. Every disagreement is like high stakes, the highest of stakes, because it might be the basis of forming a faction, and then we got to kick you out, you know, um, and and that's just poisonous. And so to be with talking with a fellow revolutionary who would say things that I don't think I agree with on in some way, and he would hear me and I could hear him, and then we could be kind of comradely about it. What do people call it? Agree to disagree kind of thing. And but just heard, like because I'm going to keep it in mind what he's saying. Like, and if I start to see things that more like his view of AI is closer to yours, Michael, than my view of AI. Like, and I'm going to like I know that you have that view of AI, which I don't think I agree with some of it, but I don't agree with the other part of it. But I'm keeping that in my mind because if that starts to like show more truth, then I'm like, okay, Michael and Fabio, I'm going to go that direction, or I'll go more the Kenny Annis direction, which is that other pole that I can kind of see. And so I just find that very valuable now. Like people are giving me intellectual off ramps to my own ideas where I don't have to be so wedded to something because somebody else has another alternative view. And that's given me a much more open view of how to disagree. Instead of looking at it like I'm defending my fucking castle, it's more just like people creating branches for me to move on that I'm not stuck on a single thread. So that was really meaningful to meet somebody outside of our circle who just could be like that and as if they had been on what's left all the time and being able to like disagree about things. So that was a big deal for me.
Yeah, I think that's also. Can you hear me? Am I
Yeah.
super loud by any chance? No.
Mhm.
Okay. That was really really impactful to me. I was thinking about in our ISO days how an intellectual like that would be, basically be like shipped around from one event to the other. And there's a way in which I'm like, it's almost a shame that that's not happening, that this guy isn't in front of more people, right? That there's not more people like trying to figure things out. And at the same time, it's also so great to talk to someone who's like, I don't really write for an audience. Like your question you asked him, like, who's your audience? He's like, I'm just trying to figure it out. And it's like that's actually the ethos I really, really believe we need. And it's come up around all this stuff around like who has a right to organize an anti ICE raid rally on our campus. It's like, well, did you convince the official representatives of the, like, and you being accused of doing things on that behalf of others without their permission somehow? And it's like, I'm not doing anything on the behalf of anyone else. I'm doing this because I think this is what's going to save the world I live in.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of like, that's the kind of anarchisty ethos that I've come back to. Like everyone just comes with empty hands. No one has some special gifts they use to buy, status. Like we're all just here with our ideas and our hands empty, and we're just trying to figure it out. Um, and he, embodies that by just like being a genuinely interested human, you know. It was also really powerful me, I'll say, uh, Kenny, to hear you talking about like when we connected around the kind of professional managerial identity politics training and just seeing how the ideology within academia essentially trains people to go out and be like your very concrete experience of that, and also just seeing the scene at 24th Street, like just being there, and it's like the none of these like brilliant, smart, technocratic, neoliberal, do-gooders have solved shit at 24th Street. And also, like, what is out? I mean, these people, they're fine. There's just a lot of poor people just hanging out, being themselves. And there's a way in which it's like, it's nice seeing everybody out. And then, but there's also like, in that one guy is passed out drunk and he pissed himself. And, like he probably would be more comfortable inside on a bed. He maybe needs a bath and some clean clothes. Like they have not solved any of the problems. And if you have a memory for these things, it's like that's what the freaking pro-capitalist NGO nonprofit people have been promising for the last 50 years, and it's still, there's here's the people who cannot be meaningfully integrated into your magical economy. um yeah, so that was really profound, just to be back at 24th Street and see like, oh yeah, there's still a massive uh what we would call lumpen proletariat, and also like you don't know who's who, and it's just people, there's just people trying to live,
Mhm.
and the
You know,
system is, does it's like in spite of all this crap.
that's exactly the feeling I had again walking in the streets of San Francisco, the Mission, in Powell, and just thinking about how Tucker Carlson actually he keeps saying that like people on the left are afraid, and like, and I'm like, I don't know. I think maybe you're afraid of walking on these streets, and thinking that you're just gonna be stabbed at any turn and corner. But there's plenty of people, because this is literally where I come from. Like if Tucker Carlson were to where I was born in Guatemala, he fucking died. But again, that's where I had the most community and the most independent from the state actions. Like where we took care of each other, and that's why I'm like, I'm not. Everyone's afraid. That's my point. And like, and people who are in in these positions to speak on behalf of someone tend to be, generalized that, the other is afraid. And it's like, maybe we're all afraid and maybe we're not, like, because it's, again, you just live and life finds a way. And that's what also gives me hope that, yes, despite all this technocratic shit, like you said, the mission 24th Street is full of nonprofit shit, you know, and yes, they haven't solved shit, and yet people still find a way, and obviously there is like a lot of pain, but people find a fucking way, and so yeah, and it was very beautiful to be in. I didn't realize the heart of San Francisco. When you look at 24th on the map of San Francisco, is literally the heart and the kind of like the cultural center, because everywhere else is all this gentrified kind of bullshit that's happened.
It's true.
Yeah, and another thing that's true, and my brother was visiting here last weekend. He's visiting Oakland and walking on the streets of Oakland, the city, like where you get 12th Street, 14th Street, Broadway, and it's Saturday and it's a nice day and it's empty, like empty, ghost town. And it's not like people don't live in Oakland. It's not like people don't live along Broadway or on 12th Street and like that. And he's like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "I don't exactly know, but this is the story of what's happening." But that's not what I experienced on 24th Street, and in reality, it's not what I experienced even in the streets of near the Embarcadero in San Francisco. I don't. There was a there was some days when I had come back. It was last year more when I had to go back to San Francisco. That was like more places in the city proper, closer to Embarcadero, Palo Street, things like that along Market, where I saw more things closed down. I don't know if these have been a revitalization or something, but I will say this: it definitely was not like a ghost town on 24th Street, and it wasn't a ghost town along Market or along the Embarcadero. And I don't know if any of us can speak to that because none of us are regularly in San Francisco, but that was a little different.
I want to just say that. So I walked my old stomping grounds, right? This is the Mission, and some businesses have closed down. So Bank of America left, Walgreens and Cesar Chavez left.
Yes, right.
And I was shocked that actually what took their place was Mexican style grocery stores, like the Mexicans, and of course, like, I'm not saying that they are, because they had to invest millions of dollars to rent one of those fucking spaces and start a business in San Francisco at this point, and yet they're catering to working people, the immigrant community. And so that surprised me, actually, that's what's happening in that section of the Mission. So I mean, I don't know, I probably have to look more into it, but it shows me that the immigrant community is thriving. It's like, thriving in a way, right? Like, despite all this shit, like, it's still finding a way to still have roots in there, because I was expecting there to be more like posh restaurants or posh fucking bars, but that's not what I saw in that section of the Mission.
Right. Like you do see like we had seen even before the lockdowns, we had seen along Valencia, you could see that. And it was starting to take place.
Yeah.
And it was starting to take place on sections of Mission between 16th and 24th. But I agree with you. Like, it's not something more complicated is going on. That is not all just the story of the capitalist monolith, just breaking through there. That was interesting.
And maybe we'll find out that there is some,
yeah,
but they are catering to the fucking immigrant community.
Right. Like it's like Bank of America owns that thing and just put that thing.
Right.
Possibly, very much, yeah.
They're probably getting rents from that locale.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious. So one of the things that we did on that Saturday, me, Kenny, and Fabio, was I dropped you all off, and you went out to he wanted to see the Golden Gate Bridge. He said that he had the night before, just to kind of get himself kind of prepared for going to San Francisco. He said and to go to sleep, he had watched that show Streets of San Francisco. Like that's just funny to me that he wanted to go to see he was fanboying the city a little bit, but he wanted to go to see the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was a beautiful day to see the Golden Gate Bridge. It was. I'm really glad about that. So I just dropped you two off. Was there anything in particular that you guys either talked about or happened while you guys were walking on the bridge?
He was just a tourist friend, like he was just, and we did
Yeah.
talk politics, and but it was still personal. Like, as like, I talked about Guatemala. I asked about where he lives in Cardiff, because I really haven't done research. I don't know much, and like, he talked about a little bit about the history of that region, and his family, his wife, and just
Yeah.
human things. Like, I did what I would do for anybody who comes to visit, and like, try to be as helpful and show them around. But yeah, just again, just another person visiting a an area that's in movies a lot, right?
Right. I'm just glad that it was such a beautiful day for him to see the bridge. It was beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful looking bridge on a day like that. It would be amazing to see. So I'm glad he got that. And then the discussion we had at La Boheme, which is the cafe at 24th Street, which is also the place that I think that's true for you, Michael. Like we would meet for paper sales in the ISO, then go up to 23rd Street and sell the newspaper at the Walgreens. I'm not even sure that Walgreens is still there. That Walgreens on 23rd Street might also be gone. I couldn't remember, but uh, um, so, and to see the person who owns the place being there, he's Palestinian and
The same guy.
same dude,
I'm
grumpy
like,
but
man, do
nice.
you get to go on vacation ever? I'm like, have you
Yeah,
been here like every day
yeah, yeah.
for like the past like 3 decades or something?
There
You
was
know?
a time I knew he had. I mean, I wonder about this. There was a time I knew he had employees, and I think they're either friends or related or something.
Yeah.
But I wonder now. Like, I wonder if things have gotten tighter. So, it was really good to go in there and sit in there and talk politics, which is what I did for many, many years of my life. Like you said, Kenny. Um, and when Jeff is saying we should do that more often, I am thinking of, maybe it's worth it for me to go across that bridge and every once in a while return with Jeff, and maybe Michael, you could meet us there. And maybe there could be weekends, Kenny, where you could make that trip and we could get together and talk at La Boheme. I think that would be great. But I don't know if there's anything you guys made of that part of the conversation. The most meaningful thing that came from me was when I asked him the question of, like, who did you write this book to? Not just why, but who. And like you said, Michael, his answer was really resonated with me in the sense of virtually everything I've written. I've always thought when I'm writing, who am I writing to? For what's left, I don't really think about who am I. This is just done for me and for us, and whoever might gravitate to it. And that was interesting that he was so clear. Like, no, I'm not writing to anybody. I'm just trying to figure out. I use it as a place, as a draft board to figure out my ideas, and what I think. And I feel like I have to write things to really process that. So and I even talked to Brandy about that, kind of like, was I wrong to be writing to an audience with some of these things? And she goes, well, not necessarily. I think there are times for two different things. That's kind of maybe where I'm thinking right now. But I was struck by that there does need to be a time where you're doing something just for you, and that's it's not about what kind of impact you're trying to have or what kind of case you're making. So that was probably the most meaningful moment in that discussion there, as well as just the experience of seeing everyone together, which was great. And I'm just curious, and anything else you made from that part?
I was actually, I learned a lot from Michael and Jeff. Like a different a take that I haven't heard really on the identity politics, and like as to when it started, and definitely gives me a different perspective as I'm reading MLK, right? And this poverty management. I don't know if it's a tactic, right? We kind of wonder if it was just like something incidental or it was a deliberate attempt to, direct. And so that was an important conversation to hear, play out, and as well as the big question that we've been having about this whole Charlie Kirk thing, about it, evidence based, and the utility of how much do you dive into things. And but I think the more than the actual, like, I guess, answers to the questions is the process, of being in person. I think it's a lot more efficient. I don't know what other word to say than waiting, writing emails and waiting to hear back, because you can immediately, kind of address some issues, or redirect your ideas if you have to. At least for me, I just hate emails. I hate technology. I've always done it. Since I was in college in 2005, starting, like, I hated that people were DMing each other, through Facebook, and being in the same room. Like, it took me like 2 years for my classmates to force me to get a Facebook, and that I didn't really use. So I've always had you know a distaste for technology of sorts. Like, I do think I recognize that there was something anti-human even back then.
Mm.
And so, again, just being together, uh, listening, to each other, and the back and forth, just reinforces that that's the way to do it. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've it was impactful for me also to see Jeff, because I think I was, we had like a kind of cranky email exchange, like an argument over, I mean, it was about how to talk about Marxist economics, this the kind of thing that the left is always fighting about, but just seeing him in person, I'm like, this guy is 78. I mean, how awesome is this man? Like, I love this guy, and just like you're saying, Kenny, the humanity too of, it's like the technology communication does not, like, people just tend to be crankier and meaner and less kind. And that was an important reminder, that Jeff's like an old man, but also his freaking memory is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, this guy is an encyclopedia of all kinds of radical knowledge. Um, and I feel like, um, I almost wanted to have us all go outside and talk to people and see if we could, like, I'm almost like, let's just go see if we meet anybody who agrees with us. Uh, so in a way, I'm also like, let's see, let's go somewhere. I don't know if 24th Street is the place. One of the interesting things about being in person is that I also recognize, like, when I'm listening to people talk, Fabio is very good at active listening
Mm.
and eye contact when you're talking. He's looking at you, and I realize that I find it way too stimulating to look at someone's eyes or face when I'm listening to them talk. So
Mm.
I have to, like, kind of look off while I'm listening to them, and just like little dynamics like that you don't notice or have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm actually curious, Michael. What do you think that 24 may not be a place where we can talk to people?
Oh, I'm just saying, because it's I I was just saying, like, it might not be like the best place, just because there was also a lot of, so because partially why I was saying I wasn't looking at people's faces when they were talking. I was kind of like looking out and noticing there was like people doing like some like performance art thing. I don't know. It's just a little kooky.
I gotta.
Not I don't. I wasn't. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just if we were gonna like, as an experiment, just go, instead of meeting to just talk to each other, talk to each other. I mean, kind of do like a paper sale thing, but without like a specific kind of line we're pushing, or just as an experiment to meet other, just to try out ideas with other people.
Mhm.
Um, 24th would be fine. It'd be great. It's just on Saturdays you like have all the preachers out there. That's like, why would we go to 23rd Street instead of
That's what I was gonna say. That we were missing the preacher with this loudspeaker.
They were on the other side. Actually, no, there was one there, and then there was, they were out.
Yeah.
Their speakers weren't as loud, I think.
I wouldn't be surprised, and again, because I've talked shit about this organization. It's called Calle 24. It's a non-profit, and I've known people who have run that shit, and they were the ones doing COVID pushing for the mask, and all the businesses putting flyers and shit. They were also helping people get connected to the internet because that's access.
The most important thing, yeah.
And but then when the fallout from the poverty that was dumped onto the people of the mission, they were the first ones to fucking uh, put people in a system to get a permit to be able to sell on that fucking corner. So and so what I'm saying is that I wouldn't be surprised if they also are asking for helping people quote unquote get a fucking permit to be there to speak or some shit like that. Because again, they're tied to the fucking city, politics and shit.
To the state.
Yeah.
Well, for me, when you raise that, Michael, my question starts to go to well, if we were to do something like that, or where would I want to do that kind of street corner work of like testing out to see what ideas that we're having here relate or not. I feel like my street corner would be closer here in Oakland. It would be where Pete's Coffee and Farmer Joe's are and things like that. And I'm not. So it was just. I'm glad you threw that out there because I was like, I'm not even sure I would go to that corner. I would go to a place closer to my house. But it's just something to think about. And Michael, at the end, you're the one who I think, did you end up driving Fabio back to? Okay. Was there anything that you guys talked about there?
Oh yeah, it was so pleasant. Also because I loved the city. I loved growing up in the city, and so I got to take him to one of my favorite spots. But also, turns out,
where was it?
Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
And the other thing about Fabio I learned at his talk was that he's kind of a media studies guy, right? So like he loves talking about movies and culture. I mean, that's kind of his field. But he's a big David Lynch fan, so we talked about David Lynch, and he was excited to like actually go to the actual Twin Peaks. And easygoing, fun person. And it was a beautiful day. We walked up to the top and saw the whole city all around us. And I got to recount things about growing up there, like Sutro Tower. My father told me when I was a little kid, he told me Sutro Tower was the box that the Transamerica Pyramid came in. So like,
wait,
if you could see
true?
No.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, I think it makes me laugh still just to think about it, because as a kid I was like, things come in boxes and then you open them, and like but these are memories that connect me growing up to this place, and just talking about being a young person, finding your way in the city. We talked about kids. He has kids, and I drove him. Then I drove him along, like I drove him by SF State, where I spent many years of my life. And then drove around Lake Merced and drove down the coast, and we got a beautiful view of the ocean. And
oh wow, great.
And then I took him back to Palo Alto, and he it was a beautiful night. There was tons of people out on University. There was like public art. I mean, it was very pleasant. So I don't know really what the fuck we're complaining about. Like, capitalism is awesome and our lives are great. But no, and he was just, super pleasant, easygoing guy. We talked about music. We shared. We were talking about the Doors, and oh, that's right. I showed him Hate Street, and when I knew he wanted to go to Twin Peaks, I was like, oh, we have to pass through Hate Street, the Hate District, because it's sort of it's a very culturally important place, unfortunately. But yeah, so like part of being in the city is thinking about the beat movement, and then also the hippies, and what was occurring culturally, and how that was a reflection of what was happening politically. It's almost like the beatniks just started taking LSD and painting things bright colors, and then they became the hippies. And we shared our annoyance that Jack Kerouac is way overrated and is kind of just an asshole. But Allen Ginsberg is much more critical. Like, Allen Ginsberg poetry has like a real sharp critical edge within it, much more than Kerouac. So stuff like that. He loves the Doors. We talked about Jim Morrison. We talked about how, like, there's the ideas that Jim Morrison was actually a CIA plant. And he's like, what do you think about that? And I was like, maybe, but he seems just like a lot of the other rich kids who got really into drugs and poetry that I know. I think just rich kids just are like that. And you can, his relative, he's like, his father was in the CIA, but does that mean like he actually listened to his dad and like was like, his dad was like, go pretend to be, a womanizing drug addict? I don't think he had to pretend, like, So we had conversations like that. It was lovely.
Yeah. And we all have a standing invitation to go to Italy, and he'll take us to Rome, which I think is great. And I feel like the takeaway from me, again, a lot of this stuff happens for me in the backdrop of the ISO, which when we would invite people over or have people come over, everything was hyper scripted, and everything was like, we have to have this political outcome or have this political discussion. And a lot of times, even those political discussions were probably even the wrong ones. And sometimes I even thought they were the wrong ones. But I feel like, like, I had asked Brandy if she was willing to come with me, and she goes, well, why? I'm not a Marxist. And I'm like, because I feel like this is what meetings like this are about now. It's like getting to know each other. Like, I thought, Michael, you were thinking about whether maybe your partner would come down as well. And I think it might have shaped the thing a little bit, but not that much. I think we would have had a very similar conversation, but that kind of goes in and out of like personal and political, like just kind of. And to me, coming out of that ISO experience, thinking back to that, this feels much more right, in terms of if you will, organizing or community or building relationships, trust, and connections for the possibility someday of actual solidarity and support and learning from each other. So I feel like this was a real reason that this was such a great experience is it comes in contrast to possibly all those things I experienced in the ISO that I just feel like are not the way I want to do things. Although, it helped me find, what I believe in Marxism, or some of the things I believe in Marxism. So it's not all bad, but I think that's a big part of this weekend for me, is in contrast to the kinds of things that I had done before with people who were, quote, luminaries. And even that whole notion of these people who like are brighter than us thing, that deflation of that. I mean, I'm a fanboy, but that's not due to Paolo. I mean, Fabio, this is due to just the fact that I'm so grateful. and I don't think I could have
Right.
written such a thing that he wrote. So that really for me was a takeaway. And then last, you guys can have, but like it looks like, and I think this, Michael, is like we were going to talk about value in a future discussion in our Marxist
Important.
study group
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like Fabio has agreed to kind of join us for that one where we talk about value, and maybe start with Michelle's question that she posted to us as a starting point. And I just think that is really super exciting. Like he could join us on one of those Zoom things and join us in that discussion. And I do hope that when we do I want to do a study group on this, either he joins us or I would like to video it and just send it to him, like what we're doing, just so he can benefit from the different views that not just you, me, or Jeff have, but
Right.
Wendy and Michelle and Bo, like they're super sharp. So I think he would get a lot out of hearing us just kind of chew up his book. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I just feel like we've done a great job of just bringing somebody into our community and us having the possibility of joining him as well.
Actually,
Go ahead, Mike.
something Kenny said made me think about this issue of intellectuals in the movement, right? Because I feel it so much when you, Kenny, you're like, any of this shit that comes out of this middle class milieu is just such fucking, there's so much betrayal in it. And yet I feel like Fabio, just by being himself, is modeling like this is what how an intellectual is supposed to relate to the movement. Just you figure out ideas because you really want to figure them out, and you don't sort of hold yourself above other people because you figured something out, or like you wrote something that people find useful, right? And it's like that's the kind of relationship that we need with intellectuals, not to put them on a pedestal, but like that is productive intellectual work that does help a potential movement. And you can't just let intellectuals like that think they're the fucking shit and run things. That's the problem. That's what destroyed the ISO. Instead of people who, someone like that, or someone like Fabio, I imagine is open to seeing what leadership actually emerges and responding to what is actually there, and being, just a person with empty hands, ready to help.
Yeah, that's exactly, like I anything that comes from like the middle class, the educated middle class, I look at it with suspicion at first. And so, to be more critical, not to say that other stuff is also, not to be criticized, but I guess it's just, to me, it reminds me of Animal Farm. Have like that's the critique, right? Like, do you let a different set of technocrats run your fucking society? That's not the world I want. Like it's a world that we build together through things like this, but in mass, right? Like where we have discussions, deliberations, and because what we're doing also has to translate to something concrete, right? That's what I asked that question about, like, like me working in a poultry farm. Like, I'm not gonna risk shit. I'm being honest right now. Not right now. Like, if I see something else taking root, and like, and that's the reality we're in. And I think that's the big question that we don't necessarily have an answer to. But what we're doing in each of us in different ways, right? Like you're organizing at your work site, Lipson, trying to fight connections. I'm trying to figure out, like, I talk to whoever wants to listen, and I say, this is my opinion. And like, you need, ultimately everyone has to come up with their own, contributions to a collective conversation. Right. And again, why the reason I do what you're saying, like, because I want to eliminate this fucking glorification of education, because I see it in my working class people that they default to a doctor, they default to a fucking teacher, they default to the principal, right? And no, you have opinions, you have something to contribute, and ultimately, if we don't have the people at the very bottom in the movement, it's just some other technocratic shit. and so that's why I'm like for me, my mission, I guess, is to make sure that we are aware of that, constantly, that we don't fall into, again, read fucking Animal Farm. That's the only way I can put it.
Any final thoughts?
Thanks for coordinating and making it happen, Andy.
Yes, I'm really glad that this was able to be pulled together. And obviously Fabio's flexibility on all this made it possible as well. So that was great. And so this was fun. So I appreciate you guys talking about this. And I'm looking forward to, having future discussions with Fabio. I do think I hope to have him join us on What's Left to talk about the labor theory of value as it's understood, as it was originally conceived by Ricardo and Marx and things like that. But also I want to hear his version of it. Like, I think a discussion about that, I think that area is a very important area for people to get a hook on in economics, and in political economy, I guess. And so that's an area that I think I would love for him to kind of give a presentation about that, and we could have a discussion about that here on What's Left. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Kenny. So What's Left is a weekly political podcast channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes, wherever you found this episode, or on our blog, what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find the link to our blog in the episode notes. If you want to reach out to us about ideas for future episodes, feel free to use that link to contact us at What's Left directly. And I want to say somebody had asked us to reach out to Simon Elmer as possibly a person to talk to, another Marxist who was against the lockdowns. We did, and he's agreed to join us. So that will be coming up in a week or two from now, or maybe 2 weeks. So thank you for making that suggestion. Although that was in our comment section of YouTube, but that'll work as well. And I remind you, if you like anything here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications for any of our 7 platforms: Spotify, iTunes, BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, or Telegram. So for Kenny, for Michael, and for Andy, thank you, Fabio, for joining us this weekend. And thank you all, folks, for hearing us talk about it, because it was a lot of fun. Take care and see you next week.